It was a moment that would change everything, and neither of them knew it at the time. Nathaniel Stone, the CEO of one of the biggest tech companies in the country, had spent the entire evening in his penthouse office, buried in reports. He didn't notice her at first. Sarah, the maid, quietly entered the room with a tray of fresh coffee, a small task she did daily. It was routine, or at least it should have been. As she placed the tray down, she stumbled slightly, her breath catching in her throat. Nathaniel, distracted by the work in front of him, didn't see the moment she had almost lost her balance. His eyes met hers only for a fleeting second, and there was something in that brief exchange, something unspoken. She quickly turned away, not realizing that a single glance from her would lead them down a path neither could foresee. That evening, one simple mistake, one quiet encounter, would change both of their lives forever. The following morning, Sarah discovered she was pregnant. But not just with one child. No, this was something far more unexpected. Twins. She stood there, staring at the test in disbelief, wondering how it all happened, how she could possibly explain this to Nathaniel. The days that followed were filled with uncertainty. She tried to go about her days as if everything was normal, but nothing felt normal. She knew that she couldn't keep this a secret forever. Nathaniel needed to know. But how would he react? He had no idea. They weren't even friends. They weren't even close. Yet, somehow, they had connected in a way that neither of them had planned. Nathaniel, the man who had everything, was now about to find out he had something more coming into his life, something that would change the course of his future. Sarah thought about telling him, about explaining it all, but what could she say? I'm carrying your children. Would he believe her? Would he be furious, scared, or perhaps even indifferent? As she sat in her small apartment, the weight of her reality sinking in, she realized there was no turning back now. Her life had already changed, and so had his. And everything, from here on out, would be different. The weeks passed, and Sarah's life seemed to hang by a thread. She hadn't told Nathaniel yet. There was no easy way to do it, no perfect moment to walk into his office, the one place she had so often cleaned, and give him the news that she was carrying his children. The weight of the decision pressed down on her, the uncertainty of his reaction gnawing at her. She had spent sleepless nights wondering if it was the right thing to do, questioning whether he'd ever even care. Would he dismiss her? Would he ignore the responsibility? Sarah couldn't shake the doubt that maybe she was the one who had made the mistake, not him. But that didn't change the fact that the children growing inside her were a part of him too. One afternoon, after cleaning a particularly large suite in the penthouse, Sarah was dusting off the coffee table when Nathaniel entered the room, his presence filling the space with an air of authority and quiet power. He looked exhausted, his suit wrinkled from a long day of back-to-back meetings. His eyes met hers, and for a brief moment, there was something unspoken, something raw in that glance, as if he could sense the change in the atmosphere. Sarah felt her heart race. This was it. This was the moment. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, she simply handed him the coffee tray she had prepared. He took it from her, his fingers brushing hers for a brief second, sending a shiver down her spine. He looked at her for a long time before setting the tray down, his gaze lingering as if trying to read her. Is everything okay, Sarah? He asked, his voice calm yet firm. Sarah nodded quickly, swallowing her nerves. She could barely look him in the eye, and for a moment, she wondered if she should just leave, escape this room and his piercing gaze. But she stayed. I need to tell you something, Sarah finally managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathaniel raised an eyebrow, his expression unreadable. What is it? Sarah could see the concern flicker in his eyes, and for the first time, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this wouldn't be as bad as she feared. She took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she looked down at the floor. I'm pregnant, Nathaniel. With twins. There. She said it. The words hung in the air, thick and heavy, as she waited for his reaction. Nathaniel stood still, his expression unreadable. Time seemed to stretch on as he processed what she had just said. Finally, he spoke, his voice low, almost in disbelief. Twins. Sarah nodded, feeling a lump form in her throat. She had waited for this moment for so long, but now that it had arrived, she couldn't find the words to explain herself any further. Nathaniel stepped back, his hand running through his hair as he took in the news. How is this possible? he asked, clearly struggling to make sense of it. Sarah could feel her chest tighten as she looked at him, his confusion cutting through her like a blade. She wanted to reach out, to tell him everything was going to be okay, but she wasn't sure if it would be. "It's yours, Nathaniel," she whispered. "I'm sure of it." Nathaniel's gaze softened for a moment before he turned away, pacing the room in thought. The silence between them was deafening. Sarah waited, holding her breath, unsure of what he would say next. After what felt like an eternity, Nathaniel stopped pacing and turned to face her, his expression still unreadable. "What do you want me to do, Sarah?" he asked quietly, his voice tinged with uncertainty. Sarah swallowed, her heart pounding in her chest. She had no idea what she wanted him to do, but she knew that she couldn't raise these children alone. She didn't have the strength to face the world by herself, especially not now. "I don't know," she replied honestly, "but I can't do this by myself." Nathaniel was quiet for a moment before he nodded, his eyes searching hers. "We'll figure this out," he said, his voice steady, though there was something in his eyes that told Sarah he didn't fully understand the weight of what he was agreeing to. But that was okay. For the first time, Sarah felt like she wasn't alone in this. He had hurt her, and that, she realized, was the first step in the journey ahead. The days that followed were filled with uncertainty. Sarah had hoped for a quick resolution, but Nathaniel remained distant, his mind constantly racing. He hadn't known what to do with the news she had given him, and now, they both seemed to be walking on thin ice. He had agreed to help, too, figure things out, but Sarah could feel the tension in the air. It wasn't the same as before. The warmth between them was replaced by an unspoken fear. For the first time, she felt a deep divide between them. Nathaniel wasn't the same man she had admired from afar while cleaning his penthouse. He had been confident, driven, and always had an answer for everything. Now, he seemed lost, uncertain. He spent his days buried in work, and when he did speak to her, it was almost as if he was speaking through a veil, distant and unreachable. Sarah had never felt so alone, even though she was carrying his children. One evening, after another long day of cleaning, Sarah sat down in the small kitchen of her apartment, looking out the window at the city lights. The night felt heavy, as if the world was holding its breath. She couldn't do this by herself, but Nathaniel wasn't ready to step up. She had hoped for support, for comfort, but what she had received was confusion and coldness. Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. It was a message from Nathaniel. "We need to talk. Can you meet me at my office tomorrow?" Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Was this it? Was he finally going to acknowledge the reality of their situation? She stared at the message, unsure of what to expect. She had spent so much time wondering if he would come around, if he would truly be there for her, and now, it seemed like the moment of truth was finally arriving. The next day, Sarah made her way to Nathaniel's office. The tall glass building loomed in front of her, and as she entered the lobby, she couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. She was nervous, her heart racing with each step she took toward the elevator. When she arrived at Nathaniel's office, the door was slightly ajar, and she could hear the faint sound of voices inside. She took a deep breath and pushed the door open. Nathaniel was sitting behind his desk, his usual sharp suit on, but his expression was different. He looked tired, weary, as if the weight of everything had finally caught up to him. "Sarah," he said softly, looking up as she entered. "Come in." She stepped into the room, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it. The moment of truth. She stood in front of his desk, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Nathaniel," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what to do anymore. I can't do this by myself." Nathaniel looked at her for a long moment, his eyes searching hers. "I know," he said quietly. "I don't know what to do either. But I know one thing for sure, we can't turn back now." Sarah felt a lump in her throat. "I don't want to turn back," she said, her voice trembling. "I just want to know that you're with me in this, that we're in this together." Nathaniel stood up, walking around the desk to stand in front of her. "I'm with you, Sarah," he said, his voice firm now. "I don't have all the answers, but I'm here, and I will do everything I can to make this work." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was the beginning of something new, something they could build together. Maybe, just maybe, they could face this challenge and come out stronger on the other side. Nathaniel reached out, gently wiping away a tear from her cheek. "We'll figure this out," he said again, his voice reassuring. Sarah nodded, her heart swelling with a mix of relief and uncertainty. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she believed that they could face it together. The weeks that followed were a blur of small moments, some filled with hope, others with doubt. Sarah had been trying to settle into her new reality, but it wasn't easy. Nathaniel had kept his word. He was trying. But the strain between them was palpable. They spent most of their time in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Sarah was adjusting to the idea of motherhood, learning to navigate the waves of emotions that came with carrying twins. She had never imagined her life would take such a turn. The excitement she had once felt was now mingled with fear. Could she really do this? Could she raise 2 children on her own, even with Nathaniel's support? The thought of being a mother was overwhelming, and she often found herself looking at her reflection in the mirror, wondering who she was becoming. Nathaniel, on the other hand, had become more present. He had moved some of his meetings around to spend more time with her, though it still felt like a constant tug-of-war between his responsibilities as a CEO and his new, unexpected role as a father. But even as he tried, there was a distance between them, an unspoken understanding that neither was fully prepared for what lay ahead. One evening, Sarah found herself sitting on the balcony of their apartment, gazing out at the skyline. The city buzzed with life, but she felt a strange stillness within herself. The realization hit her again. She was carrying Nathaniel's children. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that everything was about to change. The quiet hum of the city was interrupted by the soft sound of the door opening behind her. Nathaniel stepped outside, his hands tucked in the pockets of his jacket. He had been quiet lately, but tonight he seemed different, more open, less guarded. "Sarah," he began, his voice calm, but with a hint of something deeper, something unspoken. She turned to look at him, her heart pounding in her chest. "I've been thinking," he continued, taking a seat beside her, "about what you said. About us. About everything." Sarah waited, unsure of what he was going to say next. She had never expected this kind of conversation from him. "I know I haven't been the best partner," Nathaniel said, his words slow but deliberate. "I've been trying to figure this all out in my own head, and I've realized that I haven't been fair to you. To us." Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. She had never expected him to admit his struggles. "I'm scared too," Nathaniel confessed, his voice softening. "I don't know how to be a father. I don't know how to be the person you need me to be. But I want to try. I want to be here for you, Sarah." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. It wasn't what she had expected, but it was exactly what she needed to hear. She had been afraid that Nathaniel would pull away, that he would retreat into his work and leave her to navigate this journey alone. But now, hearing him say those words, she felt a flicker of hope. For the first time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, they could make this work. The silence between them stretched for a few moments before Sarah spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what comes next," she said, "but I want to try too. I want to do this together." Nathaniel nodded, his eyes meeting hers. "We'll figure it out," he said, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. And for the first time in a long time, Sarah believed him. The future was uncertain, and they still had so much to work through, but in that moment, she felt something shift. She wasn't alone in this anymore. Nathaniel was here, and maybe, just maybe, they could build a life together, one step at a time. The weeks that followed were a turning point for both Sarah and Nathaniel. The uncertainty that had once hung in the air like a heavy cloud began to shift, replaced with something more tangible, hope. Nathaniel had started making an effort. He was home more often, and when he was present, not distracted by his phone or buried in work. There were still moments of silence between them, moments where the weight of their situation felt too heavy to bear, but they had begun to navigate this new chapter together, slowly but surely. Sarah had been nervous at first, unsure if this was just a fleeting change, something Nathaniel would eventually grow tired of. But each day that passed, she saw a different side of him, one that was more open, more vulnerable. He listened when she spoke, he asked about her day, and he even started attending doctor's appointments with her, something she had never expected. She had learned to embrace the small moments, the quiet ones, where they could share a laugh or simply sit together in the same space without needing to fill the silence. Nathaniel had made it clear that he was committed, but there was still a part of Sarah that couldn't help but wonder if he truly understood what they were about to face. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day of cleaning and preparing for the arrival of the twins, Sarah sat down on the couch, her body aching with exhaustion. Nathaniel entered the room, holding 2 cups of tea. He handed one to her and sat beside her, his eyes soft with concern. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his voice gentle. Sarah smiled faintly, taking a sip of the tea. "Tired," she admitted, her eyes meeting his. "But I'm okay. I'm just scared." Nathaniel's expression softened even more. "Scared of what?" he asked, his voice full of empathy. "I don't know what's going to happen, Nathaniel," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I've never been a mother before. I've never had to raise children on my own. And now, I'm carrying twins. I'm just scared that I'm not enough." Nathaniel reached out, taking her hand in his. "You're more than enough," he said, his voice firm but filled with warmth. "I know we're both scared, but we're in this together. You're not alone in this. I'm here, every step of the way." Sarah felt her heart swell with emotion. She hadn't realized how much she had needed to hear those words. It was easy to forget that she wasn't alone when the days were long and the weight of everything seemed too much to bear. But Nathaniel's reassurance was like a lifeline. "I don't want to fail," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't want to let you or the babies down." Nathaniel squeezed her hand. "You won't fail. You're stronger than you think, Sarah. And we'll figure this out. Together." For the first time in weeks, Sarah allowed herself to relax. She rested her head on his shoulder, the familiar scent of his cologne grounding her. She didn't know what the future held, but in that moment, she felt a sense of peace. Nathaniel was there, and for the first time, she truly believed that maybe, just maybe, they could make this work. The path ahead wasn't going to be easy. There would be more challenges, more uncertainty, but they were in this together. And that made all the difference. As Sarah closed her eyes, the quiet comfort of Nathaniel's presence surrounding her, she felt a flicker of hope. Hope that she hadn't allowed herself to feel before. For the first time in a long time, she believed that no matter what, they could face the future, hand in hand. The days seemed to stretch longer as Sarah and Nathaniel prepared for the arrival of the twins. Despite the quiet moments of connection they shared, Sarah could still feel the tension between them. Nathaniel was doing his best to be there for her, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing. The truth was, she was scared, not just of becoming a mother, but of what their future might look like. Would Nathaniel still be there when the babies arrived? Would he truly be the father she hoped he would be? She had no way of knowing for sure. Each day brought its own challenges, and every time she looked at Nathaniel, she felt a mixture of hope and fear. It was an odd combination, but it was all she knew. One afternoon, as Sarah sat in the living room, absent-mindedly tracing the rim of her coffee cup, Nathaniel came into the room, looking more serious than usual. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, his hands in his pockets, his eyes focused on her. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. "Is everything okay?" she asked, setting the cup down. Nathaniel didn't immediately respond. Instead, he walked over to the couch and sat down beside her. She could feel the weight of the silence hanging in the air, thick and heavy. He finally turned to her, his expression conflicted. "Sarah, I've been thinking a lot lately," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "About us. About everything." She swallowed, unsure of what was coming next. "What do you mean?" she asked softly. Nathaniel hesitated before speaking again. "I've been thinking about the future, and I realized that I've been focusing too much on the business side of things, on my company, on all of this," he said, motioning around the room. "And I haven't really been thinking about what I'm going to be like as a father, or what you're going to need from me." Sarah's heart ached at the vulnerability in his voice. She had known this moment was coming, but hearing him admit it so openly made her feel both relieved and terrified. "I want to be there for you," Nathaniel continued, "but I know I haven't been showing you that. I've been distant, I've been wrapped up in work, and I haven't really been present." Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she listened to him. She had always known that Nathaniel was a driven man, someone who was focused on his goals, but hearing him admit that he had neglected her and their growing family hit her harder than she expected. She didn't want to feel like an afterthought, but sometimes it seemed like that was exactly how Nathaniel viewed her. Still, in that moment, she saw the sincerity in his eyes, the raw honesty that had been missing for so long. "I need you, Nathaniel," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I can't do this alone. Nathaniel's eyes softened as he reached for her hand, gently squeezing it. I know. And I'm sorry, he said, his voice filled with remorse. I promise I'll do better. I'll be here. For you. For our family. The words hung in the air, a promise that felt both reassuring and uncertain at the same time. Sarah wasn't sure if he fully understood what it would take to make things work, but for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that he was trying. That was all she could ask for, effort. They sat there for a while, neither speaking, just holding on to each other's presence. The silence wasn't uncomfortable this time. It was peaceful, and for Sarah, that was enough. The road ahead was still unclear, and there were more challenges to face. But in that moment, she knew they were in this together. And that, for now, was enough to carry her through the uncertainty. Nathaniel was finally ready to step up, to truly be a partner in this journey, and that made all the difference. The days turned into weeks, and with every passing moment, Sarah could feel her life shifting in ways she had never imagined. The twins grew stronger inside her, and her body changed to accommodate them. Yet the emotional landscape between her and Nathaniel was still uncertain. Though they had taken steps toward reconciliation, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Nathaniel had promised to be there for her, but she often found herself wondering if he truly understood the gravity of what was to come. They still didn't know what life after the babies would look like, and every day felt like walking on a tightrope. Nathaniel continued to do his best, attending doctor's appointments and helping out at home, but there were times when his mind seemed elsewhere, consumed by the weight of his responsibilities. Sarah noticed it, the subtle signs of stress on his face, the late nights at the office, and the phone calls that seemed to never end. She wanted to reach out to him, to tell him that it was okay to slow down, but she wasn't sure if he would listen. As much as she tried to make peace with the situation, she still longed for the man who had once been so present in her life, the one who had made her feel seen and important. One night, after a particularly exhausting day, Sarah sat in the living room, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. She could feel the twins moving inside her, a reminder that everything was about to change. She had always wanted a family, but now that it was becoming a reality, she felt a strange mix of excitement and fear. She had no idea what kind of mother she would be, or what kind of life she and Nathaniel would build for their children. The silence in the room was broken by the sound of Nathaniel's footsteps. He walked into the room, his face tense, and sat down beside her. Sarah turned to him, sensing that something was different. Sarah, he began, his voice low. I've been thinking a lot. He paused, looking for the right words. I know I've been distracted lately. There's been a lot going on, but that's no excuse. I've been trying to keep everything together, and I've been failing at it. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure if this was the conversation she had been waiting for, or if it was just another moment of him expressing his frustration. What do you mean? She asked, her voice soft but steady. Nathaniel looked at her, his eyes filled with sincerity. I've been so focused on the business, on everything that's going wrong with it, that I've been neglecting what really matters. I've been neglecting you, and I'm sorry. Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. She had wanted to hear him say that, but hearing it now, it felt different. It felt real. I don't want to make the same mistakes, Nathaniel continued. I know I've been distant, but I want to be here for you. For the babies. For us. Sarah felt tears well up in her eyes. She didn't know what to say, but she knew that this was a turning point. Nathaniel was finally opening up, finally acknowledging the cracks in their relationship. She had longed for this moment, but now that it was here, she felt a mix of relief and uncertainty. I don't want to do this alone, Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. Nathaniel reached out, taking her hand in his. You're not alone, he said firmly. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. I know I've made mistakes, but I will make it right. I'll be the father you need me to be. I'll be the partner you deserve. Sarah looked at him, her heart full. For the first time in a long time, she felt like they could do this, together. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew they would face it side by side. And that, more than anything, was what she needed to hear. Nathaniel wasn't perfect, and neither was she, but in that moment, they made a promise to each other. To try, to fight for their family, and to love each other no matter what. The days leading up to the twins' arrival were filled with a sense of anticipation. Sarah and Nathaniel had adjusted to the changes, learning to navigate the unknown together. But even as the excitement grew, so did the pressure. With each passing day, Sarah could feel the weight of impending motherhood, the need to be strong, not just for herself, but for her family. Nathaniel, too, was trying to balance everything. The strain of running a business while preparing for fatherhood was not lost on him. Yet, he tried to be there for Sarah in every way he could. Still, there were times when his work consumed him, and Sarah found herself alone, wondering if they were truly ready for what was coming. It was the night before their big day, the eve of the twins' arrival, and Sarah couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. What would tomorrow bring? Would everything go as planned? Would Nathaniel be there? The uncertainties of life seemed to settle in her chest, heavy and unrelenting. She reached out for Nathaniel's hand, feeling the warmth of his skin. His steady breathing reassured her, but she couldn't shake the thoughts swirling in her mind. Nathaniel stirred, his hand squeezing hers in response. "Sarah?" His voice was soft, almost a whisper in the quiet of the night. "Are you okay?" Sarah turned to him, her eyes filled with both worry and exhaustion. "I don't know," she admitted. "I'm just scared. Tomorrow, everything changes. I don't know if I'm ready." Nathaniel propped himself up on one elbow, his gaze soft and understanding. "I don't know if anyone's ever truly ready," he said, his voice steady. "But we'll do this together. You're not alone, Sarah. We're in this together. I'm right here with you." The sincerity in his words eased the tension in her chest, even if just a little. Sarah nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "I don't want to let you down, Nathaniel," she whispered. "I don't want to fail as a mother, as a partner. I'm just scared I won't be enough." Nathaniel gently cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "You're already enough, Sarah. You always have been. Don't doubt yourself. And don't doubt us. We're going to make it through this. One day at a time. Together." His words wrapped around her like a warm embrace. And for the first time in days, Sarah allowed herself to relax, to let go of the fear that had been gnawing at her. Maybe they weren't fully prepared for what lay ahead, but they had each other. And that, she realized, was all that mattered. The next morning, Sarah and Nathaniel arrived at the hospital, ready for the moment that would change their lives forever. The nerves and excitement mixed as they walked through the sterile hallways, their hands firmly entwined. Nathaniel's presence beside her was a comfort, grounding her in a way she hadn't expected. He was there, steady and calm, while Sarah tried to calm the whirlwind of emotions inside her. As the hours passed, Sarah's anticipation turned into something more powerful, love. She could feel the babies moving inside her, a reminder of the life they had created together. And as she looked at Nathaniel, she felt the depth of their bond. The uncertainty that had once felt so overwhelming began to fade. This wasn't just about becoming parents. It was about becoming a family. When the moment came, and the twins were finally born, everything changed. The pain, the fear, the worry, all melted away as she held them in her arms. Nathaniel stood beside her, his eyes wide with awe, as the reality of fatherhood settled in. This was their new beginning. They weren't perfect, and the road ahead would still have its challenges, but in that moment, Sarah realized that they had everything they needed to face it together. Nathaniel was there, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of peace. The future might be uncertain, but as long as they had each other, they would be ready for whatever came next. The first few weeks after the twins were born were a whirlwind. Sarah had never experienced anything so overwhelming, and yet, every moment felt more meaningful than she could have imagined. The twins, both small and fragile, had become her entire world. She often found herself gazing down at them, filled with awe and love, wondering how life had brought her to this point. But it wasn't just the babies that occupied her mind. It was Nathaniel, too. The man who had once seemed so distant now sat beside her during late-night feedings, his large hands carefully cradling the tiny infants. He was a father, and though the transition hadn't been easy for him, Sarah could see the transformation happening before her eyes. He was learning. He was trying. And that was enough. There were still moments when she doubted, moments when the weight of motherhood felt too heavy. The sleepless nights, the endless feedings, the never-ending cycle of diapers and crying. It was exhausting. And Nathaniel, despite his best efforts, still struggled with balancing his business and family life. But each time she saw him look at the babies with that soft smile, each time he held them close, she knew they were making progress. They were building something together, slowly but surely. One evening, as the babies finally fell asleep after a long day, Sarah and Nathaniel sat together on the couch, the soft glow of the lamp casting a peaceful light over the room. Nathaniel's hand found hers, and they sat in silence for a while, just taking in the quiet. "How are you holding up?" he asked gently, his voice full of concern. Sarah leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. "It's hard," she admitted, her voice soft. "But it's also the most amazing thing I've ever done. I'm scared, Nathaniel. I'm scared I'm not doing it right, that I'm not enough." Nathaniel turned to her, his expression serious but full of warmth. "Sarah," he said softly, "you're doing everything right. You are more than enough. These babies, they're lucky to have you. And I'm lucky too." Sarah's heart swelled at his words, and for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to truly believe him. The doubt, the fear, the worry, they didn't disappear entirely, but in that moment, they didn't seem as overwhelming. They had each other, and together, they could face anything. Nathaniel kissed her forehead, his hand gently rubbing her back. "We're in this together," he whispered, "and I'm not going anywhere." The simplicity of those words, the promise they held, gave Sarah a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. She didn't know what the future would hold. There were still so many uncertainties, but for the first time, she truly believed that they could face it, hand in hand. The road ahead would be long, and it wouldn't always be easy, but they would build their family, one step at a time. And that was enough. As Sarah closed her eyes, resting in the comfort of Nathaniel's arms, she felt a quiet sense of gratitude wash over her. She had always dreamed of having a family, but she had never imagined how much it would change her life. It was harder than she could have ever expected, but it was also more beautiful than she could have ever dreamed. And with Nathaniel by her side, she knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together as a family. It had been several months since the twins were born, and Sarah and Nathaniel had settled into their new life. The sleepless nights and constant demands of parenthood had become their new normal, and while they still faced challenges, they had found a rhythm. Nathaniel had stepped up in ways Sarah had never expected, and for the first time, she felt like they were truly a family. Yet, even as they grew closer, there were still moments of doubt. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that their lives had been irrevocably changed, and sometimes, she wondered if they would be able to keep up with the demands of their growing family. Nathaniel, too, was feeling the pressure. Running his company while raising twin babies was no small feat, and there were days when he felt like he was being pulled in a million directions. But no matter how tough things got, he always tried to be there for Sarah. He was present, even if only for a few hours each day, and that meant everything to her. One evening, after a particularly stressful day at the office, Nathaniel came home to find Sarah sitting on the couch, a baby in each arm, looking exhausted but still managing a smile. He could see the tiredness in her eyes, the weight of the world bearing down on her shoulders. As he walked over to her, he gently kissed her forehead, feeling the familiar warmth of her skin. "How are you holding up?" he asked softly, his voice filled with concern. Sarah looked at him, her gaze tired but steady. "I'm doing okay," she said, her voice a little shaky. "It's just a lot sometimes. I love them so much, but I don't know how to do everything. I don't know if I'm doing enough." Nathaniel knelt beside her, placing a hand on hers. "You're doing more than enough, Sarah," he said gently. "You're amazing, and I see how hard you work every single day. I'm so proud of you." Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. She had never expected this from Nathaniel, this quiet support, this unwavering belief in her. It was what she had always needed, but never knew how to ask for. "I don't feel amazing," she admitted, her voice small. "I feel like I'm barely holding it together." Nathaniel looked at her, his expression softening. "You don't have to do it all alone," he said. "I'm here. I'm right here with you, every step of the way." The sincerity in his voice washed over her like a wave, and for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt like she could breathe. She wasn't alone. She never had been. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. Nathaniel smiled, his hand brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "You're stronger than you think," he said. "And we're in this together. Always." As Sarah looked at him, her heart swelled with gratitude. In that moment, she realized that they had made it through the hardest part. The doubts, the fears, they were still there, but they didn't feel as insurmountable as they once had. With Nathaniel by her side, Sarah knew they could face anything that came their way. They were a family, and that was enough. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but they would walk it together, one step at a time. And for Sarah, that was all that mattered. As the months passed, the rhythms of family life continued to evolve. The twins were growing fast, and each day brought new milestones. First words, first steps, and 1,000 little moments that made Sarah's heart swell with love. But despite the joy and the overwhelming beauty of it all, there were still moments of doubt. As much as she cherished the time spent with her children, Sarah sometimes felt a pang of sadness that she couldn't quite explain. The dream of a perfect family seemed so close, but there were still days when she questioned whether she was truly enough. Nathaniel, too, was adjusting. He had made significant strides in being present for the family, but the pressure of running his company still weighed on him. It was a constant balancing act, one that left him feeling drained and uncertain at times. But no matter how exhausted he was, he made sure Sarah knew that she wasn't alone. He was there for her in every way he could be, offering support when she needed it most. One quiet afternoon, after a long day of work, Nathaniel came home to find Sarah sitting on the couch, holding one of the babies in her arms. The other twin was napping in the crib nearby. Sarah looked up when she heard the door open, and a small smile tugged at her lips. Nathaniel walked over to her, his face lighting up as he saw their child. He leaned down to kiss Sarah's forehead, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "How was your day?" he asked softly. Sarah sighed, her shoulders relaxing at his touch. "It was good," she said, though there was a hint of fatigue in her voice. "But sometimes, I wonder if I'm doing enough." "You know." Nathaniel sat down beside her, his gaze never leaving her face. He could see the uncertainty in her eyes, the weight of the world she carried in silence. "You're doing more than enough," he said, his voice firm and filled with love. "You're an incredible mother, Sarah, and you're doing an amazing job. I see it every day." Sarah's throat tightened, her eyes filling with tears. "I just don't always feel like I am," she whispered. "I want to be everything for them. But sometimes, it feels like I'm failing." Nathaniel reached for her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "You're not failing," he said gently. "You're doing exactly what they need. And I'm right here with you. We're in this together." Sarah let out a shaky breath, the tears she had been holding back finally slipping down her cheeks. She had been carrying so much on her own, afraid to admit that she needed help. But Nathaniel's words, his presence, brought a sense of peace that she hadn't felt in a long time. "I don't know what I would do without you," she whispered, her voice filled with gratitude. Nathaniel smiled, brushing a stray hair from her face. "You'll never have to find out," he said softly. "I'm not going anywhere." In that moment, Sarah realized just how much Nathaniel had changed. The man she had once feared would be distant and unavailable had become her rock. He was present in ways she hadn't expected, and the partnership they were building felt stronger than ever. As the twins cooed softly in the background, Sarah allowed herself to rest in the comfort of Nathaniel's arms, knowing that, no matter what the future held, they would face it together. The road ahead would still have its challenges, but they were no longer walking it alone. And that was everything. Nathaniel was her partner, her equal, and together, they would continue to build the family they had always dreamed of. As the seasons changed, so did Sarah and Nathaniel's relationship. They had settled into a new routine, one filled with the demands of parenthood, but also the warmth of shared responsibilities and growing affection. Their lives were no longer defined by uncertainty. Instead, they had built a foundation of trust, love, and understanding. The twins, now toddlers, brought laughter and chaos to their days. Nathaniel had become the father he had promised to be, and Sarah, though still learning, had grown into her role with a quiet strength she hadn't known she had. There were still hard days, moments when the exhaustion felt overwhelming, but they had learned to lean on each other, to find comfort in the little things. One evening, as Sarah put the twins to bed, she paused in the doorway of their nursery, watching them sleep peacefully. It was in these quiet moments that she felt a deep sense of gratitude for how far they had come. She thought about the woman she had been just a year ago, the woman filled with doubt, fear, and uncertainty. Now, looking at her family, she felt a quiet pride. They had made it through the hardest parts, and while the future was still unknown, they had each other. Nathaniel walked into the room, his footsteps soft on the carpet. He stood beside her, his eyes following hers as he gazed at the twins. "They're growing up so fast," he said, his voice filled with awe. Sarah smiled, feeling the weight of the years slip away in that moment. "I know," she replied, her heart swelling. "It's hard to believe. It feels like just yesterday they were so tiny, needing us for everything." Nathaniel nodded, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "And now look at them," he said softly. "They're already becoming little people, with their own personalities." Sarah leaned into him, her heart full. "I couldn't have done it without you, Nathaniel," she said quietly. "You've been there for me every step of the way. You've been more than I could have ever asked for." Nathaniel kissed the top of her head. "And you've been everything I've needed, Sarah," he said, his voice steady with emotion. "We've built something beautiful together, and I'm so proud of what we've created." They stood there for a while, holding each other, their hearts connected by the life they had built. The twins stirred in their cribs, but neither of them moved. They were content to be in this moment together. In the years they had spent apart, they had both experienced their own struggles, but now, as a family, they had found something more powerful than either of them could have imagined: hope. They had come through the storm together, and now they were stronger for it. The road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, but Sarah knew that with Nathaniel by her side, they could face anything. They had built a life together, and they would continue to build it, one step at a time, side by side. As they left the room, their hands intertwined, Sarah felt a deep sense of peace. The future was still uncertain, but it no longer frightened her. She had Nathaniel, she had their children, and together, they had everything they needed. As time passed, Sarah and Nathaniel found their lives slowly shifting into a new, more settled routine. The twins, now older and full of energy, were growing up faster than they could have ever imagined. Sarah often found herself marveling at their small milestones. First steps, first words, their curious little personalities unfolding before her eyes. But it wasn't just the children who were evolving. Nathaniel had transformed as well. The man who had once been consumed by his work was now deeply involved in every aspect of their lives. He attended their doctor appointments, helped with the late-night feedings, and most importantly, he was always there, steadfast and present. They had built something strong, a partnership that was founded on trust, patience, and love. There were still challenges, of course. No family was without its ups and downs, and there were moments when stress crept in, whether it was a late night at the office or an especially tough day with the twins. But Sarah had come to understand that these were just parts of life. They weren't perfect, and neither was she. But in their imperfections, they had found something more beautiful than perfection: unity. One afternoon, as the sun began to set and the golden light streamed through their living room windows, Sarah and Nathaniel sat together on the couch, the twins playing on the floor in front of them. The peacefulness of the moment filled Sarah's heart with gratitude. She looked over at Nathaniel, who was watching the kids with a smile, his eyes filled with a love that she recognized all too well. He turned to her, catching her gaze. "You okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. Sarah smiled, feeling the weight of the years slip away. "Yeah," she said softly. "I'm just happy. We've come a long way, haven't we?" Nathaniel chuckled softly, his fingers brushing against hers. "We really have," he said, his voice full of warmth. "I can't believe how much has changed. It feels like just yesterday we were sitting in this very room, unsure of what the future would hold." Sarah nodded, her eyes softening as she looked at him. "I never imagined it would be like this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm so glad it is." Nathaniel reached over, taking her hand in his, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "Me too," he said. "I think we've built something incredible, and it's only the beginning." The two of them sat there for a long moment, simply enjoying the quiet, the peacefulness of their life. It wasn't always easy, but it was real. It was theirs, and that was enough. As the twins began to get restless, Sarah and Nathaniel rose to their feet, ready to dive back into their busy lives. But there was a new sense of calm between them now, a deeper connection that had been forged over time. The challenges of the past had brought them closer together, and the future no longer seemed so daunting. They had built a family, a life, from the ground up. And with each day that passed, they grew stronger, more united. They didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but they knew one thing for certain: they would face it together. Nathaniel looked at Sarah with a smile, his eyes full of love. "Whatever comes next," he said softly, "we've got this. Together." Sarah smiled back, her heart full. "Together," she agreed, knowing that no matter what the future held, they would always have each other.